My name is Brian, Chapter 10. The title is John 2 Points plus 1 Big Joke Point. When we split into our animal groups on Thursday, Mr. Bingham says, "Class, your animal reports are due next week. If you haven't done it yet, now is the time to think of an original way to present what you've learned about your animal to the rest of us." Isabel and I look at one another. A moment of panic flashes over her face. "Uh-oh," she says. "All we've got are my notes and a tape recording that everybody's already heard." "Look at John," Richie calls out. I hear John before I see him. He's making a loud noise through his nose that sounds more like a pig snorting than a person snoring. But snoring is what he means by it because he's lying across two desks, pretending to be asleep. Mr. Bingham goes over and talks to him in a low voice. "But, Mr. Bingham," John says in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "I'm doing my work. This is part of my animal project, hibernation." Everyone except Mr. Bingham is laughing. "What a nutcase," Isabel says. When she's not looking, I give him a quick scratch to my head. John sees it and smirks at me. "Enough," Mr. Bingham says. We all go back to work and John gets back in his seat. Isabel and I review her notes. I learned that the average Canada goose lives for 20 years and that they mate for life. I also find out that I was right about their honking sound being a way of communicating. The male makes a two-syllable, a honk sound. The female answers with a higher-pitched single-syllable hink call. And when they're defending their territory, they make a hiss call. "This is all great stuff," I tell her. "You have to tell the class everything you told me." "You should play your tape," she says, "so they can hear the way the goose honks. And what you said on the tape was great, just like a real reporter." I tell her I wish I'd known more about the Canada goose when I made the tape. That instead of saying I'm surprised at how big the geese look when they fly close to me, I'd say the average length of a Canada goose is 3½ feet, and the wingspan is 5½ feet, which is as tall as I am. And I add, when I describe where they're eating, I could have said that they mostly feed in the early morning and at sunset, but that they also feed throughout the day, especially when they're in family groups, just like you told me. "I wish I could have seen it all like you did," she says. "I wish we could show everyone in the class what I saw," I tell her. "That's when I get a brilliant idea. Let's make a videotape. We can do our whole report in front of a camera, and we'll videotape the geese feeding." "A nature film," Isabel says. "Why not?" "Because I don't have a video camera." "Neither do I." "But Dan's father does," I tell her, "and Dan loves to make home videos. I bet he'd be our camera person." By the time the bell rings, we've each selected the topics we'll talk about on our nature video. A close look at the Canada goose. After my tutoring session, Miss Samuels and I use the computer to write an outline of my speech. We print it out in the computer room. Saturday afternoon, Dan and Tyson and I wait on my steps for Isabel. "You sure she can ride a bike?" Dan asked. "I've never seen her on one." I told her we needed to move fast, and she said she had wheels. Just then we see big Isabel pedaling down my block. She's wearing a tough-looking black leather jacket, but is all humped over this little kid's violet and pink bike, huffing and puffing just to get the tiny wheels to carry her weight. Dan and I look at one another. No way Isabel keep up with us on that bike. "Is that your bike?" I ask when she gets off. "My sister," she says. "How old is your sister?" Dan asks. 7, as she takes her loaded backpack off her shoulders. She looks us right in the eye. We know better than to joke about the bike. Before we go looking for geese, Dan says we should practice talking in front of the camera. We rehearse in the backyard, and then we go inside so he can shoot the title cards and photos of Canada geese in the books that Isabel borrowed from the library. Tyson follows us everywhere and manages to put himself into every shot. We play back the rehearsal and titles on the television set. He loves it. "Tyson on TV," he shouts. "Tyson on TV." When Hillary comes in from soccer practice, I introduce her to Isabel and show her the terrific camera that Dan's using. But Hillary's more interested in Isabel. "Nice haircut," my sister says. "Where'd you get it?" "My grandfather's a barber," Isabel explained. "He cut your hair too if you want." They get into an intense conversation about hairstyles that I interrupt to ask, "Hillary, can Isabel borrow your bike and helmet just for this afternoon?" She agrees, and half an hour later, the three of us are headed for the Colgate mansion. Dan with the camera bag over his shoulder, me and Isabel with the scripts and snacks in our backpacks. As we approach the field through the woods, Dan and I exchange a worried look. What if John and Richie are there with 8th graders? Or what if they come while we're in the gardener's shed trying to make our movie? After we hide our bikes in a new place, I check through the window that no one's in the shed. Then I signal Dan and Isabel that it's all clear. So this is where the fearsome four hang out? Isabel comments as she follows us into the shed. Big deal. I ignore her and plop down on my old hay sack. I'm remembering all the fun we had over the summer and feel sad. I'm not coming back here anymore, I tell her. Me either, Dan says from his sandbag chair. There's a low mood in the shed until Isabel shouts, Hey, aren't we here to make a movie? I direct Isabel to stand in the middle of the field and explain the migration patterns of the Canada goose. Dan starts taping it. Isabel says I should stand next to the pond beyond the field while I describe the mating and nesting habits of the goose. Because part of my brain is thinking about all the jokes that John will make when he sees the tape, I'm nervous and make lots of mistakes. The second time I get through it without stammers and nervous laughs. Then Dan directs Isabel to sit on the front step of the shed for her next part, which is about the way the early settlers used the geese for meat and their feathers for bed stuffing. I join her there to explain that Canada geese eat bulbs, berries, roots, and post-harvest grains, which is why we're at the location. We turn off the camera and go back into the shed and wait for the geese to come from the field. I notice our backpacks that hold the food Isabel brought. Talk about eating, I say. Let's do it. While Dan props the camera in the window facing the field, Isabel and I unpack cartons of milk and Isabel-style sandwiches and brownies. After we eat, we sit back and wait for the geese. Dan and I tell Isabel about the 8th graders that John and Richie have been bringing to the hideout, about the gun, and about how we don't want to be in the club with them anymore, and about the money under the shed. I think we should just take out our share of the money right now, I tell Dan. It's ours. So they come and kill us when we find it missing, he says. Isabel gets on her case about being afraid of John and Richie. They don't even care about you guys, she says. They're too busy trying to impress those 8th grade jerks with those big shots that they are. I can't believe that your money is right here underneath this shed and you're not taking it. I value my life, I tell her. In the distance, we hear a honk, hink, a honk, hink. Dan, who's already in his post by the window, videotapes the geese approaching. I stand next to him and begin my voiceover describing the Canada geese flying in those flocks when going short distances and in a V formation for longer trips. These geese, I note, are in a loose grouping, but, I add disappointingly, they are flying right over the field and off toward New York State. They won't be stopping here for dinner. Dan turns off the camera and I turn to Isabel and ask, why didn't they stop? Don't they usually come back to the same places? Not when guns have been shot at them, she says. You should have told me about that before and I would have said that they'd never come back here. Canada geese are smart. They don't want to hang around John and Richie either. I watch the flock of geese, black specks disappearing into the scarlet sunset sky. We never catch up with them, I'd say, on any kind of bike. I've got to get home anyway, Dan comments as he starts packing up the camera. Wait here a minute, Isabel says. I have to go outside. I figure she's going to go pee in the woods just like a guy has to sometimes. I don't find out what Isabel was really doing out there until the very next day.